Welcome to A Spin on Offshore Wind, the podcast brought to you by Energy Coast, North East England's offshore wind cluster. I'm Caroline Lofthouse, bringing you industry insights, project updates and news from the UK's leading region for offshore wind and further afield. Don't forget to subscribe so each episode drops into your chosen podcast app or find it on energycoast.co.uk. For this episode, we're looking beyond our own shores to discuss how the UK supply chain has established itself as part of the global market, the geographies in which it presents the role for North East in exporting our expertise. Joining me to discuss all of this is Alan Lowdon, OBE. Alan is a board member of NOF, the business development organisation that runs Energy Coast, and is also Director of Strategic Development for the National Offshore Wind Institute in Massachusetts, and Professor in Practice and Chair of the Advisory Board within Durham Energy Institute at Durham University. Alan, I thought we would start off with a bit of a history lesson. Has the UK always been an active exporter in the energy sector, and how has that evolved to support the offshore wind sector?
Yes. I mean, this is a story in its own right. We've got lots of examples historically of the UK's influence on the energy industry worldwide. I mean, regionally, I had the privilege of being brought up in the NAI Parsons system, who provided steam turbines to most of the developing and developed world, which was fantastic. Then we had Merton McClellan consulting engineers to most of the electrical transportation systems around the world. British Gas Research and Technology. There's not a pipe which is in the ground internationally which hasn't probably had some kind of British gas influence on it. And that's both for hydrocarbons but more recently things like hydrogen. And that was also transferred into the water sector, which has gone worldwide as well. So there's lots of examples. Teesside, with its focus on hydrogen historically, now that's very relevant to the net zero challenges that the global energy markets face today. But I think the big thing about this is that the UK has really supported the technology base of the international energy sector for probably over 100 years now. So the likes of the Northeast region has been able to support the oil and gas industry in Aberdeen significantly, and that's put it in a fantastic position to be able to take those products and services and adapt them for offshore wind, because there's huge relevance to the offshore wind sector of a sector which has really got to grips with managing the ocean environment. So I think that's probably, could go on and on, couldn't we? But those are the sort of headline things. But I think one of the big things to remember is that the world has really benefited from the UK's consulting expertise in offshore wind. So the likes of Mott MacDonald, SKM before it became GHD, and even now GHD is doing a fantastic job. Atkins, Halcro, all of these big names, big brands, which have adapted their traditional energy influence and traditional energy services to those of offshore wind, and have done extremely well from an exporting point of view. Lots to talk about, but that's the stuff off the top of my head.
Yeah, like you say, lots and lots of fantastic examples from the UK supply chain and the North East England supply chain as well. And what you were just sort of saying there, so why do you think international projects and international markets come to the UK for our, advice and guidance on our skills, innovations, products and services? What's your kind of thoughts in that area?
Well, I think the first thing they come for is track record. And it's almost a catch-22. You have to get good projects to deliver good services, but the UK has got those in abundance. There's a huge portfolio, track record of international projects, and that means a lot because people like to see live examples of things going well, and the UK's got lots of them. So I think that's the first thing. Adherence to quality and standards as well. I think that's something which the UK is internationally recognised for. UK standards. Clearly we're moving back towards the British standards and the kite mark associated with that since we've left the European Union. But notwithstanding that, ISO 9000 and all its variants we adhere to those like no other nation. And I think that really does capture the attention of people who are looking to procure and also trust. There is something about the UK trusted service provision and product provision which endures. And I think those are the three main factors for me as to why the international stage looks to the UK for that assistance.
Yeah, I'd agree. When I've been travelling internationally previously, quality, health and safety are definitely high on the priorities for overseas markets looking to us. And in terms of sort of which countries the UK supply chain, and particularly Northeast England, thinking about sort of the energy coast cluster in our region, which sort of markets have those companies been active in sort of since the inception of the offshore wind industry?
Yeah, I think we certainly got to grips with it, and I was involved in the project which brought the Blythe offshore demonstrator to life over 10 years ago. And that is extremely important because the UK and the regional supply chain was able to cut its teeth on a really important project from a UK point of view. But also the supply chain and all of the types of organizations I mentioned earlier, consulting to the analytics through to fabrication, they've all had an opportunity regionally to support the likes of the early stage Dutch offshore wind industry, the Belgian offshore wind industry. Obviously, I mentioned the Blythe offshore demonstrator, which was really a fantastic thing to do regionally, but also all of the projects which are off the East Coast and the ones off the West Coast and the South Coast of the UK as well, have all benefited in some way, shape or form from an indigenous supply chain, much of which is rooted in the Northeast. So, you think of the likes of Ensure, Osbit, JDR, and Cathy in particular. Cathy have done a lot of the upstream permitting type analyses for lots of these wind farms around the UK. So it's rich and varied, but the offshore wind value chain attracts and supports lots of Northeast industry elements, which many of whom are obviously in the Energy Coast cluster.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely worth shouting about that Blythe demonstrator project, because it really was the first UK offshore wind farm, and that's where our industry, our first experience came from, right here in the region.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about when we talk about this is we've got the innovation side of it as well, and the collaborative R&D agreements that were in place between the predecessor to the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult and NAREC, National Renewable Energy Center, and its equivalent in the United States, NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab, were really significant in the technology transfer, the personnel transfer, which went into that relationship. Really very formative indeed.
Yeah, excellent. And what kind of sort of thinking about sort of international markets? I know that you are very active overseas and internationally minded, Alan. What are the kind of, in your opinion, what are the hot markets now and in the future for the offshore wind sector?
Yeah, well, the hot markets, clearly the UK is still very hot, and other parts of Europe are getting hotter as well. I mean, Poland is coming along, Lithuania is starting to think about its offshore wind industry, France is moving, and so on and so forth. But I do think the hottest market is the United States as it stands, because it's reasonably close. It's manageable from the UK, and it's also, there's a cultural fit, which I think is very important. Notwithstanding that, we still have the burgeoning markets in deeper waters in Japan, Taiwan, South Korea. All are taking offshore wind very seriously, and that's also extending further down into the Brazilian waters, and Argentina and Uruguay are also taking things considerably more seriously than they were. But I do think, in terms of supply chain ability to service the market, the United States continues to be my favorite, and also the one which I think a lot of UK companies are attracted to.
Yeah, definitely agree. And you were recently in the US for the International Partnering Forum, IPF's event in Atlantic City, which I joined too, and I was actually there with you. So we'll focus a little bit on the US market because you've just mentioned what an absolute fantastic opportunity that is for the UK supply chain. What's your kind of what's happening out there? Why should the supply chain, in terms of projects, opportunities, why should the UK supply chain really think about the US market?
I think the big thing, and certainly the shift that I've seen, Caroline, over the last 18 months is the change of administration, federal administration, with the arrival of the Biden administration. That's really unleashed the offshore wind market. And what it's done is taken the shackles off the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which is the body which permits the ocean. So I think that's a massive, massive thing to take seriously, because prior to that, it was more fragmented on a state-by-state basis without the unwavering support of BOEM. Now that's in place, so that's a big, tick in the box. So that's the first factor. I would also say that overall there is a strong intent along the eastern seaboard and also on the west coast to achieve net zero by 2050. And that is also driving a lot of policy at the state level and interventions which actually are freeing up cash for this to happen. So that's fantastically good news for everybody involved in the offshore wind supply chain who are looking to service that market. Also, there's this big push towards training and workforce development. So we have the opportunity to transfer skills and experiences. I'm personally involved in helping set up the National Offshore Wind Institute in New Bedford, Massachusetts, which looks to train the next generation of technical workforce components, and also to do other things which are a bit further down the line. But nevertheless, the idea is to bring people through to give them meaningful and very productive careers in the offshore wind sector through indigenous workforce development. So in the run-up to the indigenous position being established, then you need to ship in labor and ship in products and services to help out. And we're working with Northeast companies, one being Maersk Training, to bring this facility to life. So I think that workforce development aspect is really important. So think about the skills and attributes that you've got and how you can help shape that market. We also have a lot of stuff on the technology and innovation side. So there's university engagement, there's national laboratory engagement, which is happening now, which you can take advantage of by being a supporter of those types of projects. So you can endorse, a research project in the UK and US, which will give you visibility on the market in which you're potentially looking to enter. But the big thing I think for me about the US market is having physical presence. So it's important to show up at events. It's important to have in time when it's justifiable, and that's often a moot point because some people don't know when it's justifiable or not. Is to set up a US office, a US entity, because that's the way that people take you seriously. Is having a physical presence and being able to show up at the particular events which are going to court favor and are going to establish your brand, and all of that trust and stuff we mentioned before is going to be forthcoming as a result. But I think it's a fantastic market. The US is a lot of money, and when the US decides to do something, it does it, and the flow of capital will underpin that.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I was on the visit recently that I undertook. I was very excited by the options and the opportunities that UK companies, can take to the market. And there was certainly a very openness between the US companies wanting to have those transferable skills and those learnings from the UK, which is a tried and tested market, to take those that information and that those skill sets and those innovations overseas. Alan, yeah, definitely agree with that.
And it's don't hide under a bushel either. The US is a very positive, in your face type market, and your behaviors have to reflect that. So, don't be shy, don't be retiring, just say it as it is, and you'll get more respect from the US, your US counterparts than you will if you try to be very polite and very guarded. So just try and be as American as you can.
Excellent advice, Alan. Thank you for that. I'm delighted to be joined by John Price, JDR Cable Systems, who was recently in the US at IPF, a major offshore wind event held in Atlantic City. It was lovely to see you there, John, and I hope you had a safe journey and great journey back. So, John,
yes, thank you. I did.
John, do you want to quickly introduce yourself, please, and your role?
Absolutely, yeah. As I said, my name's John Price. I'm the Global Sales Director for Renewable Energy within JDR Cable Systems. Responsible for all pre-order activity for offshore wind, floating wind, and wave and tidal for that matter as well.
Excellent, thanks, John. And IPF, if we talk a little bit about IPF, could you tell us a little bit about the event and sort of, the purpose of the event?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the purpose of the event is almost what it says on the tin in terms of the name of the show. It's enabling like-minded companies, like-minded individuals to meet and partner up to develop the growing demands of offshore wind in the USA. And IPF, but it's very much that the whole event is around meeting and networking and understanding the needs for the market as it goes forward.
Yeah, as the International Partnering Forum. Yep. Excellent, John. That was great. Thank you. And why was JDR? I know that you had a fantastic exhibition stand because I saw it. Why were JDR exhibiting at that event?
We think it's key for us to make ourselves known in the industry, and having an exhibition booth to allow people to come meet with us, talk and discuss what we do and show our products to them is vital for us to get more established in the USA. And
are you already active in the US, John?
We are, yes. We were fortunate enough about a year or so ago to secure the inter-array cables via Yandenal in Belgium for the Vineyard 1 offshore wind project for Vineyard Wind, which are due to be manufactured for our factory shortly. But on top of that, we also secured the termination and testing scope for the offshore technicians, which we're looking to partner local unionized labour bodies to provide that local content element to the project.
Brilliant, John. And I know that you're very active in other sort of global markets as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about the other markets where JDR are active?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for us, obviously, we're UK based. As everyone knows, we're northeast based, which we think is vital for what we want to do. We are currently the only UK supplier of offshore wind power cables to the market from the UK. So UK for us is a very dominant market, but wider European market also. We have established project requirements in floating wind in around the Mediterranean and the Portugal area. But likewise, we're also delivering projects as far away as Asia, into Taiwan, for instance, which we've recently done a couple of projects out there. So for us, it very much is now a global market, and we're now looking at where the next requirements are. Is it going to be more requirements in Asia, or is it going to be the west coast of USA? We're not looking at to being based in one location or one geographical region for offshore wind. We're looking to make it a truly global business for us.
I like that phrase, truly global. In terms of sort of Energy Coast as well, I just wanted to kind of talk about you're an active participant of Energy Coast as North East England's offshore wind cluster. Do you want to talk a little bit about Energy Coast?
For us, it's Energy Coast is a vital cog in the wheel, if you like. It allows the industry, because the northeast for us in the UK is very much the dominant region for the industry for offshore wind, to get together, understand the challenges that people are facing, share ideas, share technologies, and for us to have that ability to come together, and the Energy Coast allows that to happen, is key. Otherwise we'd all be running around doing things in isolation, and that's not good for anybody. So.
Oh, that's great. And you touched on a sort of Northeast England supply chain there.
Hmm.
Why do you think the UK supply chain, and in particular Northeast England, the Northeast England cluster, has had such a positive reputation around the world? What's your kind of thoughts on that?
Well, for us, it's simple. It's had a long historical track record of doing exactly that for various markets as they've grown and evolved in the world. Yeah, and that skill base is still there. The companies involved are still very much in the region still, and we see it as the logical hub of technology for offshore wind.
Brilliant, thanks. And if you had to give some tips, because you're very internationally minded, truly global company, and I know you've got a lot of personal experience in international markets, what would be your kind of tips for UK suppliers, regional suppliers to internationalise?
Do your homework. So do a lot of research, understand where your niche could be, and understand where you fit in the hierarchy of the supply chain, and present yourself in that way. Don't try to present yourself to developers if you're a tier 2 or tier 3. But to me, it's doing that research, doing that homework, understanding because it could be a company says actually the US isn't for them. It's another market, but just truly understand that requirement and that niche where you can make a difference.
Back to Alan. For any companies that might be thinking that they're not in exporting yet, but are thinking about taking those first steps, what kind of advice and guidance would you give those companies? Not just for the US, or you can focus on the US if you'd prefer.
Yeah, good question, Caroline. I think I was once given a bit of advice many years ago at a conference I turned around and I asked this very polished lady on a panel with me. I said, "So what's the secret of your success?" And she was American. She said, "I just show up." And she said, "You may not feel like showing up. You may have a bad day, and if you don't want to go to an event, but you put your name down, just show up." She says, "Because if you don't show up, those moments of serendipity just don't happen." Mm-hmm. And I think that's great advice. So, I know certain things that cut into one's life, which mean you have to change at the 11th hour. But fundamentally, it's if you sign up, show up. That's the first thing. And I think also just having a bit of structure to the way that you're viewing an export market, be it the US or be it wherever, targeting the relevant conferences. And I know some of these things aren't cheap anymore. The majority aren't cheap. People are scrambling to make up for the last 2 years. Yeah. But nevertheless, it's an investment worth making if you make it work for yourself. So targeting the right conferences, you mentioned the IPF, the International Partnering Forum for Offshore Wind in the States. That's a great one. But there's a whole plethora of other ones in terms of the offshore wind markets or whatever market you're looking at. So have a targeted campaign for a presence, a physical presence. We can do it again now, which is great, at these events, Europe-wide, US-wide, or globally. And also, tap into the resources which are available on one's doorstep with the Department of International Trade and their export teams, and their subject matter exports, their international trade advisors. They've got a lot of knowledge, a lot of wealth of experience. They may not be technically expert in the domain that you're active in, but they will find somebody who can assist. So the Northern Powerhouse has got a very good bit of momentum now behind it, and that's starting to manifest itself as you and I saw recently in the export visit to the United States. The other thing I would say is that read around the industry, read around what's happening. In the case of the United States, you see there's two major activities going on in the region that I'm active in, which is Vineyard Wind and Mayflower Wind. Now, if you don't understand what they're doing, how can you enter their supply chain and alleviate some pain points for them? So understand their position, understand the trials and tribulations that they're likely to be experiencing and bringing new wind farms to life, for example, but also just liaise, just set up a rapport, and you do that mainly by showing up. And the other thing I think is really relevant is leveraging existing relationships in other parts of the energy space. So you may be active in oil and gas, or you may be active in solar power or whatever you're active in, hydropower, whatever it is. But you're in the energy game. And if you're in the energy game, you know energy.
Yeah.
And you just because it's a different technology class doesn't mean that you can't adapt your thinking towards that. So I think, be very open-minded, be very cognizant of the commonality across the energy industry, and think out of the box a little bit as to how you can take your services and make them work for say, offshore wind, if that's the target market you want to go into. And increasingly what we're seeing, and we'll see a lot more of this in my opinion, is the transfer of technology, skills, know-how from other safety critical industries. So that's, nuclear, automotive, aerospace, into other parts of the energy space where offshore wind or some nuclear or whatever it is, just getting this flow of technology and understanding and insights and experience going. And finally, on the offshore wind thing, I think, anybody could do worse than signing up for the NOF offshore wind database, because the amount of information on there is just mind-boggling, and it's such a resource for people to really cut the teeth on if they're going into that particular technology class, that operational area of the energy sector. It's worth the investment, and it really does bring you up the learning curve quickly.
Thanks for your time and insights, Alan, and also thanks to John Price from JDR Cable Systems. I'm sure we'll be speaking to other companies involved in exporting globally in future episodes of the podcast. And don't forget, you can subscribe to A Spin on Offshore Wind on all good podcast platforms, or find it on energycoast.co.uk. That's ENERGI coast, all one word, .co.uk. Join us next time for A Spin on Offshore Wind.